The applause thundered through the Morrison Tech Consulting boardroom as Derek Patterson smiled graciously at the 12-person investor panel. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the polished mahogany table, watching him accept congratulations for the revolutionary market expansion strategy I had poured 3 sleepless months into creating. The venture capitalists leaned forward eagerly praising his brilliant analysis of sustainable tech opportunities. Derek nodded humbly, never once mentioning my name or correcting their assumption. $20 million hung in the balance, and he was stealing every ounce of credit. The betrayal sliced through me like ice water, but suddenly everything became crystal clear. I stood up slowly, maintaining my composure as 24 pairs of eyes turned toward me. With a serene smile, I reached into my briefcase and placed my resignation letter directly in front of Patricia Holloway, our founding partner. 2 months earlier, I had been riding high on professional momentum at Morrison Tech Consulting's downtown Boston office. At 32, I held the title of Senior Strategic Analyst, a position I had earned through 6 years of meticulous market research and innovative thinking. The corner office with harbor views felt like validation of my analytical skills and strategic vision. My cubicle days were behind me, replaced by client meetings and boardroom presentations that actually mattered. Derek Patterson had joined our team 18 months prior as an account manager, bringing charm and client relationship expertise that complemented my analytical strengths perfectly. Standing 6 feet tall with sandy brown hair and an easy smile, Derek possessed the kind of natural charisma that made clients feel comfortable signing large contracts. His background in sales gave him confidence in high-pressure situations where I sometimes felt overwhelmed by the spotlight. Our professional partnership began organically when Patricia Holloway assigned us to work together on a mid-tier client retention project. Derek handled the relationship management, while I developed the strategic framework, and the collaboration felt genuinely productive. We discovered a natural rhythm where his people skills opened doors that my research could walk through. Coffee breaks became brainstorming sessions where ideas flowed freely between us. The sustainable technology opportunity emerged during one of those casual conversations in early March. I had been analyzing quarterly reports when patterns jumped out at me like neon signs in the darkness. Traditional energy companies were hemorrhaging market share, while green technology startups struggled with scaling challenges. A massive gap existed between established infrastructure and innovative solutions, creating unprecedented opportunities for strategic consulting firms willing to bridge that divide. My research process consumed every spare moment for weeks. I arrived at the office before sunrise, staying until security guards made their evening rounds. The Boston Public Library became my second home as I devoured industry reports and regulatory documents. I interviewed former executives from renewable energy companies, conducted surveys with sustainability directors at Fortune 500 corporations, and built financial models that revealed market opportunities worth hundreds of millions. Derek showed genuine interest in my findings, asking thoughtful questions about implementation strategies and potential client applications. His curiosity felt authentic, and I appreciated having someone who understood the business implications of my analytical work. He would lean against my office doorframe during late evening hours, bringing coffee and offering encouragement when spreadsheets blurred together. The collaboration deepened as Derek volunteered to help with client-facing aspects of the research. His network included contacts at venture capital firms and technology startups that could provide valuable insights. He offered to schedule interviews with industry leaders who might be reluctant to speak with analysts they did not know personally. His enthusiasm made the project feel like a shared mission rather than solitary research. Looking back, the warning signs were subtle but consistent. Derek began asking for copies of my research files, claiming he needed reference materials for client conversations. His requests seemed reasonable since we were supposed to be working as a team. He started using terminology from my reports in casual conversations, demonstrating familiarity with concepts he had never mentioned before our collaboration began. The most troubling pattern involved Derek scheduling private meetings with senior management to discuss what he called his strategic insights. Patricia Holloway mentioned these conversations in passing, praising Derek's growing expertise in emerging market analysis. When I asked Derek about these meetings, he assured me he was simply laying groundwork for our eventual joint presentation. His explanation sounded plausible, but something felt fundamentally wrong about the secrecy. My personal life started suffering as the project consumed increasing amounts of time and emotional energy. James. My boyfriend of 3 years noticed my stress levels climbing and my availability declining. Weekend plans got canceled for additional research sessions. Family dinners were missed while I chased down industry experts for interviews. The sustainable technology strategy represented my best chance for promotion to director level, so the sacrifice felt necessary and temporary. The breakthrough moment came during a late April evening when I finally connected all the analytical threads into a cohesive strategic framework. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Morrison could position itself as the premier consulting firm for traditional companies, transitioning to sustainable practices, while simultaneously helping green technology startups scale their operations. We could capture revenue from both sides of the market transformation. Derek arrived at my office just as I finished printing the preliminary strategy document. His timing felt coincidental, but he seemed genuinely excited about the breakthrough. We spent 2 hours reviewing the framework, and his enthusiasm validated months of intensive work. He suggested we schedule a presentation meeting with Patricia and the senior partners to share our findings. The next morning, I discovered Derek had already arranged a private meeting with Patricia to discuss his preliminary strategic recommendations for the sustainable technology market. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon, and I had not been invited to attend. When I confronted him about this oversight, Derek claimed there had been a miscommunication with Patricia's assistant about scheduling. His explanation felt hollow, but I chose to trust our partnership despite growing unease in my gut. 6 weeks before the fateful investor presentation, my suspicions about Derek's intentions crystallized into concrete concern. The private meeting with Patricia had gone exceptionally well, according to Derek, who returned to my office glowing with excitement about her positive response to his strategic insights. He claimed Patricia was impressed with his analytical thinking and wanted him to develop the concept further. The conversation that followed revealed the depth of Derek's manipulation. When I asked for specifics about what he had presented to Patricia, Derek provided vague summaries that closely mirrored my research findings, but avoided direct acknowledgement of my work. He spoke about market opportunities and strategic frameworks as though he had discovered them independently. The casual appropriation of my ideas felt like intellectual theft, but I struggled to prove intentional deception. My decision to continue trusting Derek despite these red flags reflected the complex dynamics that many professional women navigate daily. Second-guessing my instincts felt safer than confronting a respected colleague with accusations I could not definitively prove. The fear of being labeled paranoid or difficult outweighed my gut feelings about Derek's dishonesty. This internal conflict would haunt me for weeks as the deception escalated. I threw myself into expanding the research with renewed intensity, working weekends, and staying in the office until midnight became my new normal. The sustainable technology strategy evolved into a comprehensive market analysis covering regulatory trends, competitive landscapes, financial projections, and implementation timelines. I conducted 53 expert interviews, analyzed data from 247 companies, and built financial models projecting 5-year market growth patterns. Derek's involvement in the research process became increasingly problematic as he requested detailed documentation for everything I developed. He claimed these materials would help him prepare talking points for client conversations and senior management updates. His explanations sounded reasonable, but the pattern felt invasive. Every breakthrough I achieved quickly became information that Derek possessed and could potentially present as his own work. Sarah Walsh emerged as a crucial ally during this period. Working in the corporate finance department, Sarah had developed a reputation for analytical rigor and political awareness that I deeply respected. Her office was 3 doors down from mine, and we often shared late evening conversations about work challenges and industry trends. Sarah possessed an intuitive understanding of office dynamics that complemented my analytical focus. During one of our coffee conversations in early May, Sarah expressed concern about Derek's growing influence with senior management. She had noticed him scheduling unusual numbers of private meetings with partners while speaking confidently about strategic initiatives he had never been associated with previously. Sarah's observations validated my own suspicions and provided external perspective on patterns I might have dismissed as personal paranoia. Marcus Thompson, an ambitious junior analyst fresh from business school, provided additional warnings about Derek's professional history. Marcus had joined Morrison 6 months earlier and possessed networking skills that uncovered information about Derek's previous employers. Through discreet industry contacts, Marcus learned that Derek had left his last 2 positions under questionable circumstances involving disputes over project ownership and credit attribution. The revelation about Derek's pattern of appropriating colleagues' work sent chills down my spine. Marcus shared this information carefully, emphasizing that he could not verify specific details, but felt I should be aware of concerning rumors. The pattern suggested that Derek's behavior with my sustainable technology research fit a broader strategy of professional advancement through intellectual theft. My relationship with James suffered significantly during this period as work stress consumed increasing amounts of mental and emotional energy. James, who worked as a software engineer at a Boston startup, understood professional pressure, but grew concerned about my obsessive focus on the Derek situation. He encouraged me to document everything and consider speaking with Patricia about my concerns, but I remained reluctant to escalate the conflict. Weekend plans consistently fell victim to additional research sessions as I pushed to strengthen the strategic framework beyond any potential challenge. The Boston Harbor waterfront, where James and I used to take evening walks, became a distant memory as my world narrowed to spreadsheets and industry reports. The personal cost of professional ambition felt temporary and acceptable given the potential rewards of success. The most devastating discovery came during a routine email review when I found evidence that Derek had been submitting preliminary versions of my strategy to senior partners under his name exclusively. The email thread, which I discovered accidentally when Patricia copied me on a response, revealed weeks of correspondence between Derek and the leadership team about his innovative thinking on sustainable technology markets. Reading those emails felt like being punched in the stomach while someone stole my wallet. Derek had presented my analytical framework's market insights and strategic recommendations as products of his own thinking. The language closely paralleled my research documents, but every reference positioned Derek as the originating strategist. My contributions were completely erased from the narrative he had constructed. The betrayal cut deeper because of our apparent friendship and professional partnership. Derek continued treating me as a trusted collaborator while systematically undermining my credibility with management. He would ask for my input on strategic questions, then present those insights as his own discoveries in meetings I was not invited to attend. The manipulation was sophisticated and deliberate. Confronting Derek about the email discovery led to my first direct experience with professional gaslighting. Derek claimed that our collaboration had always been understood as his leadership initiative with my analytical support. He insisted that I was misinterpreting the nature of our partnership and suggested that my concerns reflected insecurity about working with someone who had stronger leadership skills. The gaslighting technique was expertly executed. Derek acknowledged my valuable contributions while subtly positioning them as supporting work for his strategic vision. He praised my analytical capabilities, while implying that I lacked the big-picture thinking necessary for senior-level strategy development. The conversation left me questioning my own perceptions and wondering whether I had misunderstood our working relationship. That evening, I made the crucial decision to begin documenting everything related to the sustainable technology project. I created detailed records of my research process, saved all email communications, and prepared backup copies of every analytical framework I had developed. The documentation process felt paranoid and defensive, but Sarah and Marcus both encouraged me to protect my intellectual property. The documentation revealed the extent of Derek's systematic appropriation of my work. Email timestamps showed that my research insights consistently appeared in Derek's communications to senior management within days of our collaborative discussions. The pattern was clear and damning, but I remained uncertain about how to address the situation without appearing petty or vindictive. My stress levels reached dangerous heights as the project approached completion. Sleep became elusive as my mind raced through scenarios and potential responses to Derek's betrayal. Coffee consumption increased while appetite declined, and James began expressing serious concern about my physical and mental health. The sustainable technology strategy was consuming my life in ways that extended far beyond professional ambition. The climactic moment of this phase came when Derek announced that he had scheduled the investor presentation without consulting me. He positioned himself as the sole presenter and lead strategist, explaining that Patricia felt his client relationship skills made him the natural choice for such a high-stakes meeting. The $20 million opportunity that I had identified and developed was now entirely his to present. Derek's announcement felt like the final confirmation of his intentions. Any remaining doubt about his character dissolved as he calmly explained that my role would be limited to providing analytical support from the audience. He spoke as though this arrangement was natural and reasonable, demonstrating either complete lack of awareness about his betrayal or sophisticated manipulation designed to normalize the theft of my work. 3 weeks before the investor presentation that would change everything, my confrontation with Derek escalated beyond polite professional disagreement into open conflict. The facade of collaboration crumbled as I directly challenged his attempt to position himself as sole creator of the sustainable technology strategy. Derek's response revealed the calculated nature of his manipulation and the depth of his willingness to gaslight anyone who threatened his narrative. The meeting took place in Derek's office on a gray Thursday morning when rain pelted the windows overlooking Boston Harbor. I had prepared carefully for this conversation, bringing printed copies of emails that documented my research process and strategic development timeline. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable, showing months of intensive work that Derek could not possibly have completed independently. Derek listened to my presentation of evidence with apparent calm, nodding occasionally as though considering reasonable concerns from a valued colleague. His demeanor remained friendly and professional, even as I laid out proof of his systematic appropriation of my intellectual property. The disconnect between his casual attitude and the severity of his actions felt surreal and deeply unsettling. When I finished presenting the documentation, Derek leaned back in his leather chair and smiled with what appeared to be genuine warmth. He thanked me for sharing my concerns and acknowledged that our collaboration had perhaps created confusion about ownership and leadership roles. His tone suggested that we were discussing a minor misunderstanding rather than deliberate theft of months of specialized research. Derek's explanation of the situation demonstrated masterful manipulation techniques that left me questioning my own reality. He claimed that the Sustainable Technology Initiative had always been understood as his project, with my role defined as analytical support for his strategic vision. According to Derek, my research contributions were valuable, but represented implementation of his conceptual framework rather than original strategic thinking. The gaslighting escalated as Derek suggested that my interpretation of our collaboration reflected inexperience with senior-level project dynamics. He implied that my background as an analyst had not prepared me for the complexities of strategic leadership, where ideas evolved through collaborative refinement. His condescending tone made my anger feel petty and unreasonable despite the clear evidence of his deception. My documentation efforts intensified following this confrontation as I realized that Derek would never voluntarily acknowledge my contributions. I created comprehensive records of every research source interview transcript and analytical framework development. The process revealed patterns of timing that made Derek's claims impossible to support, but I knew that evidence alone might not be sufficient to protect my interests. The revelation of Derek's broader manipulation campaign emerged through careful observation and discreet conversations with colleagues. I discovered that Derek had been systematically undermining my credibility with senior management through subtle comments about my limitations and his concerns about my readiness for increased responsibility. The campaign was sophisticated and deniable while effectively positioning him as my superior. Patricia Holloway's apparent preference for Derek became more pronounced as the investor presentation approached. During team meetings, she directed strategic questions to Derek, while treating me as a technical resource for analytical details. The dynamic felt like watching someone else receive credit for my intellectual children while being relegated to the role of research assistant. Derek's manipulation extended beyond simple credit theft into active sabotage of my professional relationships. He scheduled client meetings during times when I had conflicts, then reported back that clients had specifically requested his continued involvement on strategic matters. He volunteered for conference presentations that I had been originally selected to deliver, claiming that his availability made him a more practical choice. The introduction of supporting characters during this phase provided crucial validation of my perceptions and strategic advice for protecting my interests. Sarah Walsh became increasingly outspoken about Derek's behavior, sharing observations that confirmed patterns I had been struggling to articulate. Her perspective as someone outside the immediate project provided objective insight into the political dynamics at play. Marcus Thompson contributed valuable intelligence about Derek's professional history that revealed a consistent pattern of advancement through appropriation of others' work. The details were disturbing, but not entirely surprising given my recent experiences. Marcus suggested discrete documentation strategies and recommended consulting with legal experts about intellectual property protections. James provided emotional support while encouraging me to consider strategic options beyond simply enduring Derek's behavior. His background in technology startups gave him experience with intellectual property disputes and contract negotiations that proved valuable for understanding my legal position. James pushed me to think beyond immediate professional concerns toward long-term career strategy. The pressure from Derek to minimize my role in the investor presentation intensified as the date approached. He suggested that my presence might confuse the investors about project leadership and recommended that I attend as a technical resource who could answer detailed analytical questions if needed. His framing made resistance to this arrangement seem unreasonable and potentially harmful to the firm's interests. Derek's arguments about presentation strategy contained just enough logic to make me question my objections. He genuinely possessed stronger public speaking skills and more experience with high-stakes client presentations. His confidence in pressure situations contrasted with my preference for detailed preparation and comprehensive documentation. The practical considerations provided cover for his underlying agenda of complete credit appropriation. My investigation into Derek's professional background revealed a troubling pattern of similar situations at previous employers. Through industry connections and discreet inquiries, I learned about at least 2 instances where Derek had left positions following disputes about project ownership and intellectual property. The pattern suggested that his behavior with my sustainable technology strategy reflected systematic career advancement tactics rather than isolated opportunism. The discovery of Derek's history transformed my understanding of the situation from personal conflict to professional fraud. This was not a case of miscommunication or different interpretations of collaboration, but rather calculated theft executed by someone with extensive experience manipulating workplace dynamics. The realization was both validating and terrifying as I contemplated the sophistication of his deception. My strategic decision-making process evolved as I recognized that direct confrontation would be insufficient to protect my interests. Derek had positioned himself too effectively with senior management for simple truth-telling to overcome his narrative. I needed a more sophisticated response that would expose his deception while protecting my professional reputation and career prospects. The backup documentation system I developed during this period would prove crucial for my eventual counter-strategy. I created multiple copies of all research materials, saved comprehensive email records, and prepared detailed timelines that established my ownership of every strategic insight Derek planned to present. The documentation process felt defensive and paranoid, but hindsight would prove its essential importance. Derek's final manipulation before the presentation involved his attempt to position our conflict as evidence of my emotional instability and poor judgment. He expressed concerns to Patricia about my recent behavior and suggested that I was struggling with the pressure of high-profile projects. His framing made my legitimate objections appear to be symptoms of professional inadequacy rather than responses to his betrayal. The psychological impact of Derek's sustained manipulation campaign created self-doubt that threatened to undermine my confidence in my own perceptions. The gaslighting techniques were expertly applied and designed to make me question the reliability of my memory and judgment. Only the strong support from Sarah, Marcus, and James prevented complete erosion of my sense of reality. The climactic moment of this phase occurred when Derek scheduled the investor presentation as a solo performance without any consultation or notification. I learned about the final arrangements through Patricia's assistant when she called to confirm logistical details for Derek's presentation of his sustainable technology strategy. The casual assumption that Derek was the sole presenter felt like a final slap after months of systematic betrayal. Derek's positioning of himself as the singular strategic mind behind the Sustainable Technology Initiative represented the culmination of his manipulation campaign. Every conversation, every meeting, and every email had been designed to build toward this moment when he could claim complete ownership of my intellectual property with the full support and approval of senior management. The audacity was breathtaking and professionally devastating. The morning of the investor presentation dawned crisp and clear in downtown Boston, with October sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Morrison Tech Consulting's executive conference room. I arrived at 7:30, 90 minutes before the scheduled meeting, hoping to find some opportunity to influence the final arrangements, or at least prepare myself emotionally for what was about to unfold. The conference room had been transformed for the occasion with fresh flowers, premium coffee service, and leather portfolios arranged at each seat around the mahogany table. Patricia Holloway's assistant had coordinated every detail to create the perfect environment for securing a $20 million consulting contract. The setting felt surreal, knowing that my intellectual property was about to be stolen in such an elegant venue. Derek arrived at 8:15 looking polished and confident in his tailored navy suit and Harvard Business School tie. His preparation was thorough and professional, with color-coded presentation materials and backup technical documents organized in expensive leather folders. He greeted me warmly as though we were still collaborative partners rather than adversaries in an intellectual property dispute. The investors began arriving at 9, and I watched Derek work the room with the natural charm that had first impressed me about his client relationship skills. He moved effortlessly between conversations about market trends and regulatory changes, demonstrating familiarity with concepts that I had spent months researching and developing. His confidence was unshakable because he genuinely believed he deserved credit for my work. The 12-person investor panel represented some of Boston's most prestigious venture capital firms and private equity companies. These were sophisticated financial professionals who had built careers evaluating strategic opportunities and identifying innovative thinking. Their presence elevated the stakes beyond internal office politics to potentially career-defining professional recognition. Patricia Holloway opened the presentation with glowing praise for Derek's analytical capabilities and strategic vision. She described his sustainable technology initiative as exactly the kind of forward-thinking work that positioned Morrison at the forefront of emerging market opportunities. Her introduction positioned Derek as a rising star whose innovative thinking would drive the firm's future growth. Derek's presentation of my sustainable technology strategy was flawless from a technical standpoint. He had mastered every detail of the research and could speak confidently about market dynamics, competitive landscapes, and implementation strategies. His delivery was smooth and engaging, with exactly the right balance of analytical rigor and accessible explanation that sophisticated investors expected. Watching Derek present my analytical frameworks felt like an out-of-body experience where I observed someone else receiving recognition for months of my intellectual labor. The market opportunity analysis that had consumed my evenings and weekends was being applauded as evidence of Derek's strategic brilliance. Every insight that I had struggled to develop was now attributed to his innovative thinking. The investors responded with genuine enthusiasm to Derek's presentation of sustainable technology market opportunities. They asked sophisticated questions about implementation timelines, competitive positioning, and financial projections that Derek answered using language and concepts taken directly from my research documents. His responses were accurate and comprehensive because he was essentially reading from my work. The most painful moment came when lead investor Margaret Chen praised Derek's identification of the gap between traditional energy infrastructure and emerging green technology solutions. That insight had been my breakthrough moment during a late-night research session in April, and hearing it attributed to Derek felt like watching someone else accept an award for my academic thesis. Derek's discussion of competitive advantages and strategic positioning drew heavily from my analysis of regulatory trends and market timing factors. He presented my financial projections with confidence and answered detailed questions about methodology using frameworks that I had developed through weeks of modeling and testing. The theft was comprehensive and expertly executed. The venture capitalists were particularly impressed with Derek's understanding of client relationship dynamics and implementation challenges. These insights had emerged from my interviews with industry experts and former executives who had shared candid perspectives about previous consulting engagements. Derek's ability to speak knowledgeably about these nuances reflected his thorough study of my documentation. My internal emotional journey during the presentation moved through stages of shock, hurt, rage, and finally calculating clarity. The initial disbelief at Derek's audacity gave way to deep personal pain at the betrayal of our apparent friendship. The pain transformed into anger at the systematic theft of my intellectual property, which ultimately crystallized into cold determination to respond strategically. The board's enthusiastic response to Derek's presentation included specific praise for analytical elements that only I could have developed. When Margaret Chen commended his innovative approach to market segmentation, I recognized my proprietary framework for categorizing sustainable technology opportunities. The praise felt like validation of my work, even as it was being attributed to someone else. Derek's moment of triumph came when Patricia announced that the investors were prepared to move forward with a preliminary agreement for strategic consulting services. The $20 million opportunity that I had identified and developed was now generating applause for Derek's brilliant strategic thinking. He accepted congratulations with apparent humility while stealing glances in my direction. The supporting cast's reactions revealed the complex dynamics of workplace politics and gender bias that had enabled Derek's successful manipulation. Sarah Walsh sat frozen in horrified recognition of what was happening, while Marcus Thompson wore the knowing expression of someone whose warnings had been vindicated. Patricia Holloway beamed with pride at Derek's performance, seemingly unaware of the ethical catastrophe unfolding. Several investors specifically praised elements of the strategy that bore my analytical fingerprints. When venture capitalist Robert Kim highlighted the sophisticated financial modeling, I recognized months of my work building projection scenarios. When Margaret Chen praised the comprehensive competitive analysis, I heard validation of research that had consumed countless hours of my time. Derek's complete erasure of my contribution from the presentation represented the ultimate goal of his manipulation campaign. Not once during his 30-minute presentation did he acknowledge my analytical work, mention our collaboration, or suggest that the strategic insights had emerged from team effort. He presented the Sustainable Technology Initiative as the product of his individual strategic thinking. The realization that Derek had completely erased me from the narrative crystallized my understanding of his character and intentions. This was not a case of insufficient credit or poor communication, but rather deliberate and systematic theft designed to advance his career at the expense of my professional reputation. The betrayal was personal, but the theft was calculated business strategy. My decision to stand up with my resignation letter represented the culmination of weeks of strategic preparation and emotional processing. I had anticipated this moment and prepared for exactly this scenario, but experiencing the reality of public intellectual property theft still felt surreal. The resignation was not impulsive reaction, but carefully planned strategic response. As Derek basked in the applause and praise from investors who believed they were witnessing his strategic brilliance, I reached into my briefcase and withdrew the resignation letter that I had prepared weeks earlier. The document was professionally formatted and carefully worded to maintain my dignity while creating maximum impact. I stood slowly and placed it directly in front of Patricia Holloway. The shocked silence that followed my resignation gesture revealed that Derek had not anticipated this response to his presentation triumph. His panic was briefly visible as he realized that my dramatic exit might raise questions about the circumstances surrounding his strategic initiative. Patricia's confusion was evident as she struggled to understand why I would resign at the moment of apparent project success. The climactic twist of Derek's fear as I stood with my resignation letter reflected his sudden recognition that I might possess leverage he had not considered. His manipulation had been thorough and sophisticated, but he had underestimated my strategic thinking and preparation for exactly this scenario. The power dynamic shifted dramatically as investors watched the drama unfold. The boardroom fell into stunned silence as I placed my resignation letter in front of Patricia Holloway and turned toward the door with composed dignity. 24 pairs of eyes followed my movement, and I could feel the weight of their confusion and concern pressing against my back. Derek's face had drained of color as he realized that my dramatic exit might raise uncomfortable questions about his presentation timing and my sudden departure. Patricia's voice cracked slightly as she called after me, asking if we could discuss this privately before I made any final decisions. The investors shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, clearly uncertain whether this development represented a minor personnel issue or a significant red flag about the strategic initiative they had just enthusiastically endorsed. I paused at the door long enough to make eye contact with each board member before walking out. Derek attempted to regain control of the situation by suggesting that my departure reflected stress from the intensity of strategic project development rather than any substantive concerns about the work itself. His explanation sounded hollow in the wake of my dramatic resignation, and several investors exchanged glances that suggested they were beginning to question the circumstances surrounding my exit. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt surreal as adrenaline coursed through my system and the magnitude of my action began to sink in. I had just resigned from a position that represented 6 years of career development, walking away from salary and benefits that provided financial security and professional identity. The decision felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying as I contemplated the uncertainty ahead. My phone started buzzing with calls and text messages before I reached my car. Derek's name appeared repeatedly on the screen, followed by messages from Patricia Sarah and several colleagues who had heard about my resignation within minutes of my dramatic exit. I ignored all communication for the moment, needing space to process the emotional intensity of finally taking action against Derek's betrayal. The drive home through Boston traffic provided time to reflect on the strategic plan that I had been developing for weeks in preparation for exactly this scenario. My resignation had not been an impulsive reaction to Derek's presentation, but rather a carefully calculated first move in a comprehensive counter-strategy designed to expose his theft while protecting my professional future. James was waiting in our Beacon Hill apartment when I arrived, having taken time off work to provide emotional support during what we both knew would be a difficult day. His presence felt like an anchor in the storm of uncertainty that had followed my resignation. We sat together on the couch overlooking Boston Common while I described the morning's events and my emotional response to watching Derek steal my intellectual property. The revelation of my preparation for this moment surprised even James, who had supported my documentation efforts without fully understanding the scope of my strategic planning. I explained that my resignation was just the opening move in a broader campaign to expose Derek's theft and protect other potential victims of his manipulation. The counter-strategy had been weeks in development and was now ready for implementation. Derek's attempts to contact me escalated throughout the afternoon and evening, progressing from concerned colleague phone calls to increasingly desperate text messages questioning my decision and requesting opportunities to discuss the situation. He appeared at my apartment building around 9 that evening, pressing the buzzer repeatedly until building security asked him to leave, His panic was evident and satisfying. My strategic silence during the first 48 hours after resignation created anxiety for Derek, while giving me time to execute the next phases of my plan. Every call that went unanswered and every message that received no response increased his uncertainty about my intentions and potential actions. The psychological pressure was intentional and designed to destabilize his confidence. The documentation system that I had developed during the previous months proved invaluable as I prepared evidence packages for multiple audiences. I had comprehensive records of my research process, email communications, and strategic development that clearly established my ownership of every element Derek had presented as his own work. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Contact with executive recruiters had begun weeks before my resignation as I quietly explored opportunities at competing firms. 3 prestigious consulting companies had been courting my expertise in strategic analysis, and my sustainable technology research had attracted particular interest from firms looking to expand their green energy practices. The timing of my availability was strategically advantageous. Sarah Walsh emerged as a crucial ally in the aftermath of my resignation, providing inside intelligence about Morrison's internal response to my departure and Derek's growing desperation to control the narrative. She reported that several colleagues were asking pointed questions about the circumstances of my exit and expressing surprise that I had not been credited during Derek's presentation. The firm's internal chaos became apparent as clients who had specifically requested my involvement in their projects began asking questions about my availability and expressing concern about continuity of service. Derek found himself unable to answer technical questions about implementation strategies and analytical methodologies that I had developed. His lack of deep understanding became increasingly obvious. Marcus Thompson provided valuable intelligence about Derek's behavior in the days following my resignation, reporting that he appeared stressed and distracted while scrambling to schedule meetings with senior partners. Derek's confidence had evaporated as he realized that his theft might be exposed and his professional reputation destroyed if I chose to fight back aggressively. The legal consultation that I arranged for the Friday following my resignation confirmed that Derek's appropriation of my intellectual property constituted potential grounds for civil action. The attorney reviewed my documentation and expressed confidence that the evidence clearly established my ownership of the strategic frameworks and analytical insights that Derek had presented as his own work. Patricia Holloway made several attempts to schedule meetings with me during the week after my resignation, leaving voicemails that expressed confusion about my decision and interest in understanding my concerns. Her tone suggested genuine bewilderment rather than defensive anger, indicating that Derek had not yet revealed the full scope of his appropriation of my work. The investor follow-up meetings that Derek scheduled for the week after his presentation began revealing the depth of his problem. Without access to my detailed research and analytical frameworks, he struggled to answer sophisticated questions about implementation strategies and competitive positioning. The investors noticed his lack of comprehensive understanding. Derek's growing paranoia became evident through reports from colleagues who observed his increasingly erratic behavior and desperate attempts to gather information about my post-resignation activities. He seemed to understand that his professional future depended on containing any potential exposure of his theft, but he lacked information about my intentions and capabilities. My boyfriend James provided crucial emotional support while also contributing practical advice based on his experience with intellectual property disputes in the technology sector. His perspective helped me understand the broader implications of Derek's theft and the potential remedies available through both legal action and strategic career moves. The climactic twist that emerged during this phase involved my discovery of additional victims of Derek's manipulation tactics. Through discreet inquiries and industry networking, I learned about at least 3 other professionals at previous employers who had experienced similar appropriation of their work. The pattern was consistent and damning. The revelation that Derek's theft represented systematic career advancement strategy rather than isolated opportunism transformed my response from personal vendetta to professional obligation. I realized that exposing his behavior could protect future victims while establishing important precedents for intellectual property protection in consulting environments. My strategic plan expanded beyond simple revenge toward comprehensive exposure of Derek's fraudulent practices and protection of other professionals who might encounter similar manipulation. The scope of my response would reflect the severity of his crimes against multiple victims rather than just my personal experience with his betrayal. The final element of my preparation involved securing a position at Blackstone Analytics, Morrison's primary competitor in the Boston consulting market. The opportunity had emerged through executive recruiter contacts, and my sustainable technology expertise was exactly what Blackstone needed to compete for major green energy contracts. The timing was perfect for my counter-strategy. The irony of my new position at Blackstone was that their strategic priorities aligned perfectly with the market opportunities I had identified in my stolen research. I would be able to continue developing sustainable technology consulting practices while using my intimate knowledge of Morrison's weaknesses to competitive advantage. Derek's theft had inadvertently positioned me for career advancement. The phone call that changed everything came 6 weeks after my resignation, just as Derek was beginning to believe that his theft might go unchallenged. Margaret Chen, the lead investor from the presentation, contacted me directly after learning about my new position at Blackstone. She had questions about sustainable technology consulting that suggested she was reconsidering her initial investment decision. The call from Margaret Chen came on a Tuesday morning in late November as I was settling into my new corner office at Blackstone Analytics overlooking Boston Harbor. Her tone was professional, but carried undertones of concern as she explained that several investors from Derek's presentation had been discussing inconsistencies in follow-up meetings with Morrison Tech Consulting. My reputation in the industry had apparently prompted questions about my absence from the Sustainable Technology Initiative. Margaret's questions were sophisticated and pointed focusing on technical aspects of market analysis and strategic implementation that Derek had been unable to address adequately in subsequent meetings. She tactfully inquired about my current availability for consulting projects while avoiding direct criticism of Derek's capabilities. The conversation revealed that investors were beginning to question the depth of his expertise. My response to Margaret's inquiry was carefully calibrated to provide value while subtly exposing Derek's limitations. I offered insights into sustainable technology market dynamics that went beyond the research Derek had stolen, demonstrating analytical capabilities that he could never replicate. The conversation laid groundwork for Blackstone's eventual capture of the investment opportunity that Derek was failing to secure. The strategic counterattack that I had been planning for weeks began with my new position as Senior Director of Strategic Innovation at Blackstone Analytics. The title represented a significant promotion from my previous role and reflected the firm's confidence in my ability to lead major strategic initiatives. My sustainable technology expertise was exactly what Blackstone needed to compete in emerging markets. Blackstone's leadership had recruited me specifically to develop competitive advantages against Morrison in the growing green energy consulting sector. My intimate knowledge of Morrison's strategic weaknesses and Derek's limitations provided valuable intelligence that could be leveraged ethically and professionally. The information asymmetry worked heavily in Blackstone's favor. The legal action that I initiated through my intellectual property attorney represented the formal component of my counter strategy. The comprehensive documentation that I had developed over months provided overwhelming evidence of Derek's systematic theft. The attorney expressed confidence that the case was straightforward and likely to result in significant damages for intellectual property violations. Derek's professional downfall accelerated as clients began losing confidence in his ability to deliver on promises made during initial presentations. The sustainable technology strategy required deep analytical understanding that Derek simply did not possess, and his superficial knowledge became increasingly obvious in detailed implementation discussions. Several major clients requested alternative project leadership. The investor deal that Derek had been so confident about securing began unraveling as his credibility eroded through failed follow-up meetings and inadequate responses to technical questions. The $20 million opportunity that had seemed guaranteed after his presentation became increasingly uncertain as investors questioned Morrison's capabilities in sustainable technology consulting. Morrison's desperate attempts to recover from my departure included multiple job offers with significant salary increases and promises of immediate promotion to director level. Patricia Holloway personally called to express regret about the circumstances of my resignation and to inquire about terms that might entice me to return. I declined politely but firmly, explaining that my future lay elsewhere. Sarah Walsh's decision to become a whistleblower represented a crucial development in exposing Derek's broader pattern of manipulation and credit theft. Her position in corporate finance gave her access to email communications and project documentation that revealed the extent of Derek's systematic appropriation of colleagues' work. Her testimony provided external validation of my claims. Marcus Thompson's promotion to my former position created additional problems for Derek, as Marcus possessed detailed knowledge of the sustainable technology research process and could speak knowledgeably about my contributions. Marcus was not susceptible to Derek's manipulation tactics and openly discussed the intellectual property issues with colleagues and clients who asked about project ownership. The investigation that Patricia Holloway finally initiated revealed a pattern of ethical violations that extended beyond my case to include at least 2 other instances where Derek had claimed credit for colleagues' work. The firm's reputation for integrity was at stake, and Patricia realized that decisive action was necessary to protect Morrison's standing in the consulting community. Derek's reputation in the Boston consulting industry crumbled as word spread about the intellectual property theft allegations and his inability to deliver on strategic promises. Professional networks that had previously welcomed his participation began distancing themselves from association with his questionable practices. His career trajectory shifted dramatically from rising star to industry pariah. The media attention that the case attracted highlighted broader issues about intellectual property protection and gender dynamics in professional services firms. My decision to fight back publicly rather than suffer in silence resonated with other women who had experienced similar appropriation of their work. The story became a cautionary tale about workplace manipulation. Industry recognition for my innovative approach to sustainable technology consulting increased as the truth about Derek's theft became widely known. Speaking invitations and consulting opportunities multiplied as firms sought to associate with my expertise and ethical standards. My professional reputation was enhanced rather than damaged by the conflict. The venture capital community's response to the intellectual property theft allegations was swift and decisive. Derek found himself excluded from industry events and networking opportunities as investors questioned his integrity and capabilities. The reputation damage extended beyond the immediate case to affect his long-term career prospects in strategic consulting. Blackstone's competitive positioning improved significantly as we captured clients who had lost confidence in Morrison's ability to deliver on sustainable technology promises. My knowledge of Morrison's strategic weaknesses allowed us to position ourselves advantageously in competitive situations where Derek's limitations became apparent to potential clients. The climactic moment of my counterattack came when Blackstone won the same $20 million investor contract that Derek had been unable to secure for Morrison. The improved strategy that I presented to Margaret Chen and her colleagues incorporated lessons learned from Derek's failed implementation attempts and demonstrated the analytical depth that had been missing from his approach. The investor presentation at Blackstone felt like vindication for months of strategic planning and ethical business practices. Margaret Chen specifically praised my innovative analytical frameworks and comprehensive understanding of market dynamics. The recognition was professionally satisfying and personally healing after experiencing Derek's systematic betrayal. The financial terms of Blackstone's investor contract exceeded the original Morrison opportunity by 25%, reflecting both improved strategic positioning and enhanced client confidence in our capabilities. The success demonstrated that ethical business practices could deliver superior results compared to manipulation and theft of intellectual property. Derek's final attempt to salvage his career involved reaching out to me directly with an apology and offer to publicly acknowledge my contributions to the sustainable technology strategy. His desperation was evident, but the damage to his reputation was already irreversible. The legal proceedings would continue regardless of his belated recognition of my work. The transformation of my career trajectory from victim of workplace theft to industry leader in sustainable technology consulting represented the ultimate success of my strategic response to Derek's betrayal. Rather than allowing his manipulation to damage my professional prospects, I had leveraged his theft into opportunities for advancement and recognition that exceeded my original expectations. 3 months after my dramatic resignation from Morrison Tech Consulting, Derek Patterson's career lay in ruins, while my own professional trajectory reached heights I had never imagined possible. The contrast between our outcomes illustrated the fundamental truth that sustainable success must be built on integrity and authentic capability rather than manipulation and theft of others' intellectual property. Derek's termination from Morrison came in early February following Patricia Holloway's comprehensive investigation into his pattern of appropriating colleagues' work. The evidence that I had meticulously documented, combined with Sarah Walsh's whistleblower testimony and additional victims who came forward, created an irrefutable case against him. Patricia had no choice but to protect the firm's reputation by severing ties with Derek completely. The legal consequences that Derek faced extended beyond simple employment termination to include civil liability for intellectual property theft and potential criminal charges for fraud. My attorney had built a compelling case that resulted in substantial damages covering lost income, career advancement opportunities, and reputational harm. The settlement amount sent a clear message about the financial risks of appropriating others' work. Derek's attempts to find new employment in the Boston consulting industry proved futile, as word of his ethical violations spread throughout professional networks. The intellectual property theft case had become a cautionary tale that made him unemployable at reputable firms. His LinkedIn profile remained dormant for months as he struggled to rebuild any semblance of professional credibility. The broader industry impact of Derek's exposure created important precedents for protecting intellectual property rights in collaborative work environments. Several consulting firms revised their policies for documenting individual contributions to team projects and implemented stronger safeguards against credit appropriation. My case became a reference point for these policy improvements. Patricia Holloway's public apology represented a significant moment of accountability and organizational learning. She acknowledged that Morrison's culture had inadvertently enabled Derek's manipulation through insufficient oversight of project ownership and credit attribution. Her commitment to implementing stronger protections for intellectual property reflected genuine contrition and systemic change. My promotion to Vice President of Strategic Innovation at Blackstone Analytics came with responsibility for leading the firm's expansion into sustainable technology consulting. The title represented vindication for my analytical capabilities and strategic vision while providing a platform for continued professional growth. The role exceeded my original career aspirations at Morrison by several levels. The $25 million investor contract that Blackstone secured using my refined sustainable technology strategy demonstrated the market value of authentic expertise versus stolen intellectual property. Margaret Chen and her investment partners praised our analytical depth and implementation capabilities, while drawing implicit contrasts with Derek's superficial understanding of the market dynamics. The investor relationship evolved into a long-term strategic partnership that generated additional opportunities worth hundreds of millions of dollars over subsequent years. My role in developing and managing these relationships established my reputation as a leading expert in sustainable technology consulting. The professional recognition validated my decision to fight back against Derek's theft. Sarah Walsh's promotion to Senior Finance Director at Morrison reflected Patricia's commitment to supporting employees who demonstrated integrity and ethical leadership. Sarah's willingness to speak truth about Derek's manipulation had required courage and principle that Patricia wanted to reward and encourage throughout the organization. Her advancement sent important cultural messages. Marcus Thompson's success in my former position at Morrison provided additional validation of the analytical frameworks and strategic insights that Derek had stolen. Marcus properly credited my foundational research while building upon it with his own innovations. His ethical approach to intellectual property created positive precedents for future collaborative work. James and my personal relationship strengthened significantly through the crisis as he provided unwavering support for my decision to fight back against workplace injustice. His encouragement to document everything and pursue legal remedies had been crucial for my eventual success. The experience deepened our partnership and mutual respect in ways that enhanced our long-term compatibility. The speaking engagements and conference presentations that resulted from my public stand against intellectual property theft provided platforms for advocating stronger workplace protections for women and minority professionals. My story resonated with audiences who had experienced similar appropriation of their ideas and contributions. The advocacy work became a meaningful extension of my professional identity. Industry awards and recognition for my innovative work in sustainable technology consulting validated my analytical capabilities and strategic vision. The accolades came from prestigious organizations that evaluated merit based on actual contributions rather than presentation skills or political maneuvering. The recognition felt earned and authentic in ways that Derek's stolen praise never could have been. The psychological healing that occurred over months of vindication and success helped repair the damage that Derek's manipulation had inflicted on my confidence and self-perception. The gaslighting techniques that had made me question my own memory and judgment lost their power as external validation confirmed the accuracy of my perceptions and the value of my contributions. The financial security that came with my promotion and successful legal settlement provided independence and options that enhanced my personal and professional autonomy. The resources allowed me to pursue opportunities based on interest and strategic value rather than immediate financial necessity. The freedom felt like a form of justice for the stress and uncertainty Derek had imposed. My involvement in mentoring young professionals, particularly women entering strategic consulting, became an important way to share lessons learned from my experience with workplace manipulation. The guidance helped others recognize warning signs of credit appropriation and develop strategies for protecting their intellectual property. The mentoring felt like meaningful contribution to positive change. The transformation of my relationship with Morrison from employment to respected competitor created interesting dynamics as our firms competed for major consulting contracts. Patricia Holloway occasionally expressed regret about losing my capabilities, while acknowledging that her firm's handling of Derek's behavior had made my departure inevitable. The professional relationship remained cordial despite our competitive positions. Derek's final attempts to rehabilitate his reputation through public apologies and admissions of wrongdoing came too late to affect legal proceedings or industry perceptions. His acknowledgement of my contributions felt hollow, given the extensive evidence that had already established my ownership of the stolen intellectual property. The apologies appeared calculated rather than genuine. The life lesson that emerged from this painful but ultimately transformative experience centered on the importance of documenting achievements and standing up for professional rights even when the personal cost feels overwhelming. My initial instinct to avoid confrontation and maintain collegial relationships had enabled Derek's theft, while my eventual decision to fight back strategically had led to career advancement beyond my original aspirations. The broader message about workplace dynamics and gender bias resonated with audiences who recognized similar patterns in their own professional experiences. Derek's success in manipulating organizational perceptions reflected systemic issues that extended far beyond individual character flaws. Addressing these patterns required both personal courage and institutional change. The emotional satisfaction of watching Derek face consequences for his unethical behavior provided closure that simple career success could not have achieved alone. Justice required accountability for his systematic manipulation and theft, rather than just my own professional advancement. The legal and reputational consequences felt proportionate to the damage he had attempted to inflict. The unexpected gift of Derek's betrayal was that it forced me to advocate for myself in ways I had never attempted before. The documentation skills, strategic thinking, and legal knowledge that I developed while fighting his theft became valuable capabilities for navigating future professional challenges. The experience transformed me into a stronger and more sophisticated professional. The sustained success that followed my counterattack against Derek's theft demonstrated that ethical business practices could deliver superior results compared to manipulation and fraud. Clients appreciated working with professionals who possessed genuine expertise and integrity rather than stolen insights and borrowed credibility. Authenticity proved more valuable than deception in building lasting professional relationships. The network of supporters who emerged during my fight against Derek's theft became valuable professional relationships that enhanced my career prospects for years afterward. Sarah Walsh, Marcus Thompson, Margaret Chen, and others who had witnessed my integrity under pressure became advocates and references who opened doors to opportunities I might never have discovered otherwise. The peace that eventually replaced anger and hurt in my emotional response to Derek's betrayal reflected the healing power of justice and vindication. While I would never forget the pain of his manipulation, the successful resolution of our conflict allowed me to focus on positive opportunities rather than past grievances. Forgiveness became possible once accountability was achieved. Have you ever experienced someone taking credit for your hard work or ideas? How did you handle it? And what would you do differently if it happened again? I would love to hear your stories and thoughts in the comments below. Please give this video a thumbs up if my experience resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming workplace challenges and standing up for what's right. Share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of documenting your contributions and fighting back against professional injustice. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to protect your own intellectual property and professional dignity. Remember that your ideas and contributions matter, and you have every right to receive proper credit for your hard work and innovation.